There are many facets to history, and one of the hardest to get a grasp on is culture. We spent a lot of time talking about things like what was the most popular song or most popular movie at a particular time. But how do you rank things like fashion or entertainment or trends alongside things like politics and economics and war? Are the things we like nothing more than fleeting fancies, side notes to history, or are they something more? The history of a weird pink plastic lawn ornament might say more about us than you would imagine. There are 6 extant recognized species of the genus Phenacopterus, 4 distributed in the Americas and 2 native to Afro-Eurasia. They are commonly called flamingos, a word derived from the Portuguese or Spanish meaning flame-colored. They are filter feeders with the unique shape of the bills structured to filter mud and silt from their food, which includes shrimp and algae. And despite appearances, the birds are not naturally pink. The U.S. National Zoo explains that as a flamingo dines on algae and brine shrimp, its body metabolizes the pigments, turning its feathers pink. And, of course, they offer an interesting enigma, as described by Matt Walker, editor of Earth News at BBC in 2009. It is one of the simplest but most enigmatic mysteries of nature. Just why do flamingos like to stand on one leg? The question is asked by zoo visitors and biologists alike, but while numerous theories abound, no one has yet provided a definitive explanation. But of the oddities of the flamingo, none is perhaps more odd than the lesser recognized 7th flamingo species, Phenacopterus rubber plasticus, that, while widely distributed worldwide, originates from a single breeding ground, Leominster, Massachusetts. A 2006 edition of the Leominster Champion quoted Don Featherstone of the Union Products Company. A friend of mine worked at the Worcester Art Museum. He got a call from the Union Products asking if they knew anyone who could sculpt and design plastic items. They were making flat plastic ornaments at first and were looking to go 3-dimensional. I took the job offer after a great fear of starving to death. Union Products specialized in plastic lawn items made using the new process of injection molding. Meg Mayer, writing for the Smithsonian Institution's Lemelson Center for the Study of Invention and Innovation, wrote in 2020, "The town was a hotspot of plastic production, with 60 companies making everything from Foster Grant eyeglasses frames to Tupperware. Union Products merchandise appealed to first-time homeowners of post-World War II working-class subdivisions who were looking to add pizzazz to their property." The plastic flamingo would become by far Featherstone's most well-known work, but he told the Champion it was not the first bird that Union Products asked him to sculpt. "They asked me to work on a duck, so I went to buy a real duck to study. I named him Charlie. When I had the plastic duck done, I set him free in Cogs Hill Park." But then they asked for something more exotic. He continued, "You can't go locally and buy a flamingo. So I got some books, and one that had some good shots was National Geographic. I made the silhouette and then put on the clay, and that's how it all got started." Mayer writes that Americans had long associated the flamingo with South America and the Caribbean, the bird's native habitat. The exotic bird was also culturally connected to South Florida, a fashionable vacation destination for the wealthy for decades, where flamingos had once lived in great numbers. Jennifer Price, an environmental historian at the University of California at Los Angeles, writing in a 1999 edition of the journal The American Scholar, explains, "It was a flamingo. Since the 1930s, vacationing Americans had been flocking to Florida and returning home with flamingo souvenirs. In the 1910s and 1920s, Miami Beach's first Grand Hotel, the Flamingo, had made the bird synonymous with wealth and pizzazz. After a 1926 hurricane leveled Millionaire's Row, developers built hundreds of more modest hotels to cater to an eager middle class, served by new train lines. And, in South Beach especially, architects employed the playful Art Deco style, replete with bright pinks and flamingo motifs. Although, she notes, this was a little ironic, since Americans had hunted flamingos to extinction in Florida in the late 1800s for plumes and meat." But the success that would carry the pink plastic bird to icon status was driven by more than the association of the bird with sunny Florida. Anna Delaria, an assistant professor of art history at Miami University, writing in a 2015 edition of the journal The Conversation, explains that Featherstone's faux fowl was a product of its time. Union Products hoped that the faux coral-colored bird would offer customers a little cachet as well as tap into other trends of the day, including interest in Caribbean culture and love of all things pink. The year 1957 was the year of Elvis Presley's Jailhouse Rock and the '57 Chevy, of popular plastic toys like Whammo's hula hoop and the Frisbee, all icons of mid-century nostalgia. The late 1950s also witnessed the solidification of a commodity-driven suburban way of life, along with a host of new anxieties over class and status. She notes that there was an explosion of popularity in Caribbean culture in 1957. Caribbean-American pop star Harry Belafonte's album Calypso, which contained the hit single Banana Boat song, dominated the Billboard charts in 1956. And as of 1957, Life magazine cover story attests Americans were flocking to Caribbean resorts in record numbers. And De La Ria also notes the color. And then there's the color pink. Art historian Carol Ann Marling explains that in the 1950s, pink was perceived as young, daring, and omnisexual. She points out that the popular celebrities like Mamie Eisenhower, Jane Mansfield, and Elvis Presley loved to incorporate pink in their wardrobes, their bedroom decor, and, in the case of Elvis, their cars. There was also post-war life. A 2012 edition of Smithsonian Magazine interviewed Featherstone. A flamingo-friendly trend was the sameness of post-World War II construction. Units in new subdivisions sometimes looked virtually identical. You had to mark your house somehow, Featherstone says. A woman could pick up a flamingo at the store and come home with a piece of tropical elegance under her arm to change her humdrum house. Also, people just thought it was pretty, adds Featherstone's wife, Nancy. Dr. Medina Lisansky of Cornell University's College of Architecture wrote in the journal Thresholds in 1997. The market for plastic lawn art was born in the 1950s. A prosperous economy contributed to the successful growth of chain stores, which provided the nationwide marketplace for these new consumer goods. The rapid growth of home ownership and the preference for the single-family house with its front yard facing onto the road provided the theater for the display of yard art. But the popular pink plastic was not exactly universally acclaimed. De La Ria notes that Featherstone's duck and flamingo ornaments sold in pairs for US $2.76 and were advertised as plastics for the lawn. They became simultaneously popular and derided in the late 1950s and remain a recognizable species of American material culture. Price writes that flamingos and lawn art ran afoul very quickly of the arbiters of culture. Our critics launched the most direct attacks. In Kitsch, the world of bad taste, Gillo de Flores singled out the new lawn and garden creatures as the archetypal image of bad taste. Oddly, this revulsion might be part of the reason that the peculiarly pigmented plastic ornament has endured to reach icon status. Lisansky opines that its multivalent and multifunctional nature is the secret to its success. The flamingo is simultaneously an object of celebration, derision, and hatred. That is, the plastic pink flamingo has always had a bit of rebellion in it. De La Ria writes that, however, keeping up with the Joneses was less about outspending your neighbor than it was about conformity and maintaining appearances. The preferred look of middle-class lawns was well manicured and free of ornament, with flowers abutting the house. On the other hand, working-class consumers tended to express themselves differently, favoring loud, playful, and decorative schemes for their homes and lawn. In the 1950s, publications like Life propagated a narrowly defined definition of middle-class style and taste. So the display of the plastic pink flamingo in the 1950s and 1960s was perhaps not more unsophisticated kitsch, but rather an overt rejection of the middle-brow striving for the highbrow lawn aesthetic. The popularity continued, she explains, partly because a younger generation saw the plastic pink flamingo as a rebellion against the stay-normal pressures of post-war suburbia. Price argues that this rebellious connotation possibly reached its height with a film. When, exactly, did it become the very definition of anti-nature, the gewgaw to end all gewgaws, the ne plus ultra of lawn art? Well, it's hard to say. But by 1972, when John Waters' movie Pink Flamingos opened with a shot of the eponymous birds outside the trailer of a 300-pound woman, played by the transvestite actor Divine, who vies successfully for the national title of filthiest person alive, it clearly had happened. Price also notes art trends, where artists like Andy Warhol brazenly sought out the cheap, the fake, the mass-produced, the plastic. The pop artist mocked nature to transgress the established boundaries of both taste and art. They commented on mass culture in terms that at once celebrated and critiqued it. Lisansky notes a popular t-shirt that read, "Ruin the neighborhood, stick 'em in your yard." 2. The rebellion appealed for multiple reasons. Lisansky notes that while the flamingo has come to symbolize the definition of poor working-class taste, it has also been adopted by gay culture as symbolic of their own disenfranchisement. And yet this association, firmly set up in John Waters' 1972 classic cult film, has not precluded the ornament from being appropriated by other cultural groups, including the mid-1980s yuppie Miami Vice-watching consumers who were drawn to the flamingo as a trendy kitsch item. Easily recognized and readily lampooned, the flamingo has acquired the rhetoric of a national cultural icon. She writes that Featherstone never envisioned that his flamingo would serve as a vehicle for the expression of such diverse interests. It was certainly not designed with that in mind, nor did he ever predict its fame. The rebellion has taken several forms. Lisansky notes that Featherstone created the blue flamingo in the late 1980s for the residents of towns where the pink flamingo had been banned by neighborhood beautification committees and aesthetic watch groups. In 1996, he introduced the Snowmingo, a white flamingo which could be purchased during the winter season when stores refused to market the warm weather pink. A person on Reddit with the screen name R.M. McSherry recalled a florist in West Lake Hills, Texas, who placed a few next to their shop on a hill. When someone complained about the eyesore and tried to file a complaint under a city signage law, he writes, "The business was understandably miffed by these complaints and the attempts by the city to intervene and tell them to remove the flamingos. So every time someone complained, they added more flamingos. Pretty soon there was a huge flock of flamingos all over the knoll. It became hugely crowded. People would drive out of their way to see the giant lawn full of flamingos, not even knowing that it was a business, openly flouting city ordinance. Westlake Hills residents became politically active about it. People loved the flamingos. People hated the flamingos. I believe there was even an election over it." And for the record, a flock of flamingos is fittingly called a flamboyance. Eventually, he writes, the business was allowed to keep the birds. By the mid-1980s, Smithsonian Magazine writes, the flamingos were transitioning from a working-class accessory to an elaborate upper-class inside joke. They furnished colorful substitutes for croquet wickets and clever themes for charity galas. The bird became a sort of plastic punchline, and at worst a way of hinting at one's own good taste by reveling in the bad taste of others. This earned a rebellion against the rebellious bird from a surprising source, John Waters, creator of the 1972 movie that cemented the singular status of the king of kitsch. Smithsonian writes, "Waters got tired of it and gradually gave away his flamingo collection. It's a classist thing," he says. "People like them in a way that's not that original anymore." But the original ornament survived even that. Somehow the terribly tacky trumpeters became part of who we are. Price writes, "I began to listen carefully to the stories people told me. My graduate school advisor heard a national public radio report on a kidnapped pair of flamingos that had sent back postcards from the Eiffel Tower. Friends had stolen the birds off lawns on drunken late-night outings in college. A New Yorker editor had a famous collection. My roommate's traveling partner had taken a flamingo named Eudora, backpacking, mountain biking, and cross-country skiing through the White Mountains, the Arctic, and the Sierras, before forgetting it one summer in a cabin at Donner's Pass." The website Visit Madison described the reason for their own pink pride. In the fall of 1979, Madison was the site of the largest known migration of plastic flamingos in recorded history. On September 4th, University of Wisconsin students and staff trudged their way to class and were stunned to see that more than 1,000 plastic flamingos had descended upon the iconic Bascom Hill in the wee hours of the morning. A prank had been pulled and a legend born. This prank-turned tradition became so popular that in 2015, the Madison Common Council declared the plastic flamingo the official bird of the city of Madison. In 2018, the Forward Madison Professional Soccer Club unveiled the bird as their official logo, and their fan club adopted the name of the flock. Since 2016, City of Leominster offers a flamingo named Featherstone as an alternative to the groundhog Puxatawny Phil, used to determine the coming spring weather by its shadow. Mayor Dean Mazzarella explained in 2016, "He's holding this rat, and there's cameras all over the place everywhere, and how couldn't he see a shadow? It's impossible." On the other hand, the plastic pink flamingo is colorful, it's happy, it doesn't move, it's iconic, and people want that on the front lawn. You can join an international society for the preservation of rights of pink lawn flamingos on Facebook that seeks to develop a thriving community of like-minded individuals that share a love of Phenocopterus rubber plasticus. In many cities, you can pay a company called Surprise Flamingo to place 40 plastic flamingos on someone's lawn overnight. And one flamingo pastime is, of course, pilfering people's pink plastic from their lawns. In a strange twist, in 2006, the science humor magazine Annals of Improbable Research, which in 1986 had presented its annual Ig Nobel Prize to Featherstone on the 30th anniversary of the invention of the plastic lawn flamingo, complained that Union had removed Don Featherstone's signature from the molds. They suggested a boycott over the question of whether a fake plastic bird was authentic. Annals editor Mark Abrahams wrote, "The public was never warned. The manufacturer released these altered flamingos directly into the wild without doing any environmental testing. A plastic pink flamingo with its featherstone removed is a pitiful thing, probably unable to survive in nature." And the same year, NBC News worried that in the year of its 50th anniversary, the lawn's favorite fowl might go extinct, as the venerable Union Products had stopped producing them and was going out of business. The following year, NBC was able to happily report that the species had been saved by a New York manufacturer. The original pink flamingo lawn ornament, the symbol of Kitsch, whose obituary was nearly written after its central Massachusetts manufacturer went out of business, is rising phoenix-like from the ashes and taking wing to upstate New York, they wrote. Lisansky notes that one of the most interesting things about the pink plastic lawn flamingos is that neither the Union Products Company nor the companies that were selling them through catalogs ever mounted an advertising campaign, making them something of an anomaly in consumer culture, a commercial success without the aid of commercialization. And you can still buy them today. More than 20 million have been made, fittingly roughly the population of Florida. And they've outlived their maker. Don Featherstone passed away in 2015. But why have they remained popular? What is the secret behind the enormous staying power of this very symbol of kitsch? Well, philosophy professor Robert Solomon of the University of Texas offered perhaps the most straightforward answer in a 1991 edition of the journal Aesthetics and Art Criticism. The problem with kitsch, he writes, seems to be its sentimentality. But what is wrong with sentimentality? I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community and locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.